I'd love to be able to give a couple examples of a comfortable child, but the child does have a buddy, but how do we start to expand on some strategies to help them expand even their speech in these situations? Teachers bringing them in through questioning, through choice or the write and read. But what if the child is only answering one word? How do you help them begin to become a little bit more initiative, but also a little bit more expressive? I think that's important. I'm already talking about a child that's somewhat verbal with a buddy, but they're not necessarily initiative and responsive. And then I'm going to ask you a question. So to think about it. If I have a child who is verbally responsive, he can answer my questions. I don't care if he's 10 or he's 15. He can answer my questions. It may not be loud. It may not be expressive. Can I get them to be verbally initiative within 10 seconds?
100%.
Exactly. Now, I know the listeners are like, wait, that's impossible. How do you do it? You know how to do it.
Well, and so this is great because you're right. If a child is able to verbally respond to you as the teacher or whoever that is in the classroom environment, by using activities that utilize a write and read approach. So again,
right.
It wouldn't matter if I said, what was the score of last night's Phillies game, right? We're in Philadelphia. So, what was the score of that game? And I said, write that down for me. If they were able to write that down for me and give me that answer, they're verbally responding. But if I also said, let's write out the full question. What was the score of last night's Phillies game? Which team played against the Phillies? It wouldn't matter the questions. If I say, let's write the question out, and I said, okay, let's read back that question. And they're able to quietly, maybe not overly, elaboratively, to have a full-on conversation. But if they can just read back, what was the score of the Phillies game? They have verbally initiated a question back to you by using that approach.
So friendship groups, small groups, even children that are in middle school, upper school, reading a question from a book, from a page. I mean, so I think what is important, really, really important, is comfort is critical, but it's not enough. So yes, comfort precedes communication, but it's not enough to become a confident social communicator because the interventions are needed.
Right.
The strategies, the teacher facilitation, it's critical. And so even though a child may be comfortable with peers, great, we've gotten that, paired, grouped with, sat with, did all that, handover, takeover, going, passing out, they're not making the progress because the interventions aren't there. It's how do you implement and facilitate the strategies developed by your treatment professional.
Yeah.
That's critical. It's not just comfort. And I think that's important because how many times do we hear she's comfortable, she's not speaking, you're missing the interventions.
Correct.
The transitional stage of communication is a critical missing link in all school-based accommodations that I shouldn't say all, that's pretty, drastic of a statement, but I would say 9 out of 10 IEPs and 504s that we read miss the boat with how to implement specific strategies to help that child progress communicatively. Correct. Not just verbally, not even just using an intermediary and repeating without eye contact, not just quiet 1 or 2 words, but elaborative, initiative, regular volume, confident, because that confidence is going to exude other areas of their life. If you have a really anxious, shut down child and you're trying to build connection and comfort and they have a flat affect because of their anxiety, that's not inviting.
Right.
That is not inviting to others because others are seeing them with that flat affect. So that connection, the comfort, the anxiety lowering strategies and interventions are really, really needed.
So what I hear you saying too is, just to back up, you said something earlier on that said about getting stuck, right? And so I think that's a good, I think for any listener, whether it's a teacher, professional, or parent, if your child is stuck, meaning you've plateaued, we've got the buddies, you've got the comfort, all the things that you listed, yet something is not growing, then that is your place to say, pause. Let's reevaluate some things of what might be missing, because again, sometimes a teacher may say, let's jump ship from, we have to switch up the buddy. Then we may start putting other factors into the mix that may not be necessary. It might be keep the buddies, keep the groups, what strategy are we utilizing? If a teacher's like, we're doing great, we're nonverbal, we're participating nonverbally, but we're not looking at what can they do to bridge up. So if that child has a comfortable buddy, but maybe only speaks to them outside of school and the others have never spoken to, well, then maybe we have to start working on that transitional strategy to say, if we're speaking to this peer outside of school, how do we bring this into the group? Or how do we use the write and read approach? If your child is able to write and read, oftentimes, if they can give a quiet verbal response, sometimes we as a parent or a teacher may say, well, then when they want to initiate and share, they will. They can verbalize. They just don't want to. And I'll say, it often is not want, it's we don't know how to insert and carry forth that expressive piece, whether that's because there's any maybe expressive language difficulties or lack of practice. Are we giving pathways for communication, meaning if they're in a group setting and everyone else is talking around them, engaging in the group, and no one's asking our child with SM to even respond or give an answer, they might be able to verbalize, but they don't have the opportunity to. And that's where taking a pause and looking at, how do we have these groups set up? What is the role of this child with SM in these groups? What is the role of their buddies? And what is the role of the teacher? Because in all parts, everyone has a role to play until that child is now starting to operate and verbalize on their own. And again, in time, we may not need as structured accommodations alongside this child. We can back up as they're making gains. But in the beginning, if they're stuck, we need to reevaluate why they're stuck, and then look at the strategies, the peers, the environments, and the opportunities that we're giving.
And also, when children go long enough and not do something, they don't know how to because they never had to. So they almost have to relearn a new way. So when parents will say, or teachers, well, he doesn't ask questions. He could be super bright and doesn't have a lot of questions to ask, or just doesn't need to, but has learned not to, doesn't think to ask questions, not because there isn't a question to ask, but I'm so used to not because of this skill basis. Other thing I want to mention is that the bridging up and bridging down. What that means is if you have a child that has a buddy and one-on-one, they're verbal, they're talking to their child quiet, to their peer, sitting next to them because we've strategically paired them and grouped them. They may hang out in the outside, quietly verbal. In the classroom, the teacher is there. Child's not very comfortable with the teacher. Child gets quiet. Teacher needs to know how to facilitate the use of that verbal intermediary in that case. But also in a larger group, too, is that maybe that peer is an intermediary. So that rather than not speak at all in a large group, maybe that child is paired and grouped with that child so the teacher can say this or that, no answer, this or that, tell Robert. And so the point is you bridge up and down based on the size of your group. And so maybe in a small group, the child's reading directions. Maybe he's answering questions with 2 or 3 peers because we've expanded the buddy process. But now in a larger group, he's using those peers as intermediaries. So the key is to understand and not see that as a weakness, not see that as a failure that the child isn't verbal in a large group, but they've bridged down in the sense that they are verbal. They're not shut down. They're not nonverbal. They're using an intermediary. And then as you use the intermediary more and more, child gets louder and louder and louder. So I think it's really, really important to understand all of this. And this is where our school trainings come into play. This is where parent education during our, consultations through Communicamp come into play. It's like we teach parents, we help them understand this so that it makes sense. Because if they're projecting their own anxiety and fears onto their children, or teachers are frustrated. Literally this morning, I got an email from a school psychologist working with a client of mine, a patient of mine, a girl, a middle school girl, saying to me, I'm feeling a lot of pressure. I really, really need to get this child to talk to me. The pressure you're feeling and putting on yourself, this child has gone from shut down, engaging, to being able to answer your questions through quiet words. That's huge progress in literally a month. And now she's feeling pressure to get her to be elaborative, initiative, and expressive. I need to talk to that psychologist because the pressure that psychologist sadly is projecting onto that child, our highly sensitive children, is insane. And the parents may sometimes do that too. So how much work do we have that we have to kind of calm the parents down? I need them to talk to their friends. She's not doing this. She's not doing that. But they're doing other things. So we have to focus on the positives, minimize the negatives, and be upbeat and positive and supportive rather than you need to and you should.
I agree. I think the other piece too is that it's not a one size fits all. And you were talking about some of the different strategies like the verbal intermediary, or, using, nonverbals or sound work, or even moving up to write and read. All of these things take finesse and knowing your child. So although there's some really good general pieces that I think are really important about the buddy process, knowing how to use it and knowing the right definition of each of these terms and what the process means is important, because sometimes we're implementing it, like you said, but we're not implementing the way it was meant to be implemented, or the way it's being defined is incorrect. And those are things that need to be worked on through those sessions, whether it's parent coaching, school consultation, in client sessions or camp. We really try to emphasize, what are we looking at? Let's troubleshoot this and get to the core of where the miss is so that we can move forward.
And I think it's important that we cannot rely on the child, on the teen, to do all this on their own. It's about facilitation. And as adults facilitate in their lives, it does become more natural, especially the older the child is, and we're helping them with the coping skills and teaching them when this is occurring, what are some things you could do. So we're definitely working with the child. But when you're in this space, such as the school and the classroom, when you're having a get together, when you're out in the real world, it's the facilitation that's critical. So for families that take their children to therapy and hang out on their phone and then come back a week later and the child is, not making all the progress, one, I'd say, what are you doing to facilitate? What are the teachers doing to facilitate? You cannot rely just on the children. And that's not fair, because the children don't know how to navigate this on their own. I don't care how old they are. It takes time. Of course, as they get older, upper school, college, and older, yes, it's way more on them, and we're working with them to teach them. But I say one of the biggest problems that I see is relying on the child that quote unquote goes to therapy to do all this, to go up spontaneously. They may not be ready for that.
That's right.